The problem in this approach, in this kind of outdated rules, reward, punishment approach that we all grew up with, is that we miss the secret sauce of what's happening inside of them and really understanding that, and that's what's causing maybe the poor choices of not sleeping or not making healthy food choices, whatever the case may be, the circumstances.
Welcome to This Empty Nest Life. Join Jay Ramsden as he leads you on a transformative journey through the uncharted seas of midlife and empty nesting. If you're ready to embark on this new adventure and redefine your future, you're in the right place. Here's your host, the Empty Nest Coach, Jay Ramsden.
Jeanine Mouchawar, Queen of Parenting Teens, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jay. Love the title. I'll accept that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's your job as coaching parents of teens. And so I think it fits, the Queen of Parenting Teens. But tell me a little bit more about what you do and how you help people.
Yeah. Thanks. And thanks for having me on. I coach moms and dads who have preteens, teenagers, young adults, and just help them figure out what to say and to do to help their child. And, most people tell me I want to be my child's go-to person, and they're not opening up and sharing with me. And I want to help them. And they just feel like, they're batting their head against the wall and they're not able to break through, and they're starting to feel that disconnection. And so, I just help parents just know what to say and do to reconnect with their kid and help them be the best version of themselves.
I love that. And does that, you think, when you coach people on those things, is that something that carries over into like when the kids leave and become adults? Can you use the same skill set, or does it change, do you think?
Yeah, it's actually the same skill set. In fact, I have many clients who say, I try these skills with my spouse and it works really well. Or I have another client who is like a big time pediatrician and heads up a huge group, and he was saying, I try this at work and it's so great, and I'm forming such strong connections with my employees. So, what I teach and my whole philosophy is just basic communication skills. Well, I shouldn't say basic, because they're not communication skills we were ever taught. But what I find is really it applies to a wide range of people. And I think, when it's the preteen time, it's a little more hands-on approach for parenting, and then a little less with teenagers, and obviously a whole heck of a lot less when they go to college. But I have clients with kids who are, in middle school all the way college and actually beyond.
Yeah. So I think for my audience, right, the people who are listening, mostly empty nesters. So they're going to be like, well, this doesn't apply. But that thing about communicating with your spouse, tell me more about that. Like give me an example.
Yeah. Well, so basically I have a philosophy where we move forward in terms of communication with 3 principles. One is, we want to get the person talking. We want to show that we understand. And then we want to help them help themselves. And so although I teach it in the context of parenting, those 3 things basically apply to your spouse. Insofar as, like, let's say that you're the primary parent and your child's grades are plummeting, or they're missing a few assignments. And so your spouse comes home and the kids have gone to bed, and you're sitting and talking and you're sharing, like, I'm really frustrated. They've got all these missing assignments and I'm worried they're not going to be able to catch up. And whenever I talk to them, they just argue with me, and it's angry. You could have your spouse go in one of 2 directions, right? You can have a spouse who's like, oh, well, you should just take away their phone and you should ground them and don't let them go to the party. And like, why haven't you, told them that and put the gauntlet down? right? You can have a spouse who takes that direction. And I see you nodding along. Like, I think if you check in with yourself and you ask yourself, how does that feel to have that kind of response? Probably not the response that's super helpful.
True.
Or you can have a different spouse who really is trying to, like I said, get you talking, show that they understand, and ask questions where you can help yourself, right? So that might sound more like, wow, yeah, that's really scary and pretty worrisome that they've got all these missing assignments. And, yeah, of course you're concerned. And, I am too. And what are your thoughts on, what we should do about it? Right? That's an approach of like having compassion for our spouse and showing curiosity about what are they thinking. Versus the first version was like, this, you should do this. You need to do this. Here's my advice, right? All of those things. And so in that regard, you could see how the same approach really can work with your spouse as it does with your child.
Yeah, absolutely. What I think I hear you saying is that, if you approach it with looking at like the person who, like your spouse or your partner, just wants to be seen, heard, and valued in 100%. That communication process. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It's just another way of saying that, right? I tend to lead with show compassion and curiosity. Like that's the secret sauce. But I love the way you said it as well.
Yeah. What I try and get my clients to when I'm working with folks is like the game changer is just ask somebody when they're coming to you. This works with most people that you love or care for is let me get my hat on, right? Do you just want to be heard? Do you want to be helped or do you want to be hugged?
I love that, Jay.
And right. Yeah. Like, so it goes, I'm okay. You want me to help you? Okay. Then I know I'm going to give you strategies, but if you just want to be heard, I'm not going to say anything. Like it makes it easí. So I love that. Like that's, I think the takeaway for my folks is like, yeah, okay. We're talking to somebody who helps parent teens. But in this regard, with communicating with your spouse or your partner, which often ends up being a struggle for people when they end up empty nesting because they weren't connected. I think that's just such a strong strategy.
Yeah, great. I love the way you said it too.
Yeah, awesome. I'm curious. You're an empty nester too, right? So you help people parent their teens, but you're an empty nester. What's that like? Like, how do you take what you teach into that life?
Oh, well, I love that question. So I learned the philosophy and principle and strategies that I teach. I learned when my kids were 14, 17, and 19. So, and it was primarily for my 17-year-old at the time. And my kids are now all in their 20s. So, what I have found is that all the principles and strategies I started using about 8 years ago, it still all applies now that they're young adults. And so, I just find that I'm still really coming back to the core foundational principles that I teach my clients. I'm finding I still have to practice every day. And, although I'm maybe 8 years ahead of somebody starting this new approach, today, it still is something where, I have to work at it. And I have to remind myself of what I need to be doing. And oftentimes, I love having the tool in my back pocket of a mulligan or a do-over. And just to know that, I'm not going to always show up the way I want to either. And when that happens, I can always go back and try again and try an approach that I know is more effective in terms of connecting with my child, who's now a young adult, and just helping them be their best version.
I love that. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And then, of course, like I said, I try to, also use the same principles now that it's just my husband and myself. So,
yeah. So what comes to mind for me is like in a moment of like, people see us, they hear coaches, whatever their interactions are with coaches, like, oh, I wish I could just like approach life like you approach life. And they think we're different, right? In some aspect, but we're not. We're humans, and we struggle with the exact same things they struggle with. And I think you used the phrase like, well, I have this in my toolbox, right? The mulligan or the do-over. We just have different tools in our toolboxes. So how would you approach somebody who's like, yeah, what does this even mean? Like, how do I go about communicating better with the people in my life? What would you tell them?
Yeah. Well, I think, whenever I'm talking to somebody, I really believe that we as humans, intellectual, smart people, we first want to understand why what we're doing isn't working. Because if we don't have an understanding why our approach isn't working, it's really hard to motivate to try a different approach. And, as we know as adults, it's hard to create new habits and communicate in new ways. And so what I'd love to just share is what I see people and parents where they're getting stuck with their kids, and why they aren't their kids' go-to person, or they don't have that connection they want. And that's what I find is really because most of us are using an outdated parenting approach that's focused on fixing or stopping behavior that we either are worried about or we're frustrated with or we're disappointed in. Right. So when it comes to teenagers, maybe they've got those 3 missing assignments, or their grades are plummeting, or they're smoking, or they're being disrespectful, or they're not taking responsibility in doing their chores, or they can't get off their devices. I mean, whatever the case may be, if you think about that interaction and that conversation you're having, most people are talking to them and trying to get them to stop what they're doing or change it or fix it. And that doesn't work for 3 reasons. One is it shuts the conversation down. So when most of us approach our children, we start telling them, oh, you need to study more, or you should get off your device sooner and do your homework first. We give our advice, our life lessons. We tell them why they're wrong. And these approaches end up shutting down the conversation. Why? Because our kids, when we approach this way, and they're teenagers now, and they're trying to exert their independence, when they sense that we're disappointed, or that we're worried, or that we're angry, right, they feel ashamed and they feel like they're letting you down. And that feels so awful inside of them that they push you away, right? And that's when they'll say, get out of my room, or you're trying to talk to them and it turns into an argument. Or if you have a more agreeable child, they might pay lip service and tell you what you want to hear, but nothing changes. So that's the first reason that when we want to motivate them to make better choices, when we focus the conversation on stopping or fixing or changing what they're doing, it doesn't work. But what are your thoughts about that? And then I'll share the second and third reason.
Yeah. So my thoughts that just turn to, I don't think that power dynamic changes, right? Even when they become, because a lot of folks that I work with are older, they're in their 50s, 60s, even 70s, and their kids are older, 30s, late 20s, early, that power dynamic doesn't change. So going back to like how we communicate with somebody, like the idea of having a conversation is literally having a conversation. It's not trying to say you're right or wrong, or leaving the door open for like, here's all my advice, do with it what you may, which, most people don't want your advice, right? Whether you're a parent or a kid, whatever it may be, they don't. Yeah. Right.
Don't.
We just offer it freely. So that's what comes to mind. I'm like trying to apply it like to parents who may struggle with having a relationship with their adult kids. Right.
Yes.
This is key.
Yeah.
This is key.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because when our kids were young and little, they were just, one, they were really agreeable. And two, we just like automatically had that connection. And what they needed from us was our advice and was our wisdom and was telling them what they should do or they need to do. You know, you need to hold my hand when you cross the street. Or this is how you tie your shoes. Right. It was like, that was our role. And usually we were rewarded with love and affection and, you know, them grabbing our cheeks like, I love you, mommy, you know? And so when we get all this positive feedback, we naturally get these like dopamine hits. And so we start learning patterns of this is how to communicate with our kids. And I think what we miss is that when they hit the teen years, they're going through this huge transition. We know that intellectually, but what we miss is that as they're going through a transition, and again, this can apply to your listeners with transitioning from home life to college or college and after college, right? We miss that their needs become different. And so we need to more have conversations that are addressing what they need from us. And that requires us to build new communication habits and approaches.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I was a former educator, and so when we were trying to get teachers to kind of move through like, well, teaching is changing. And it used to be like, well, we were the sage on the stage. That's how it was when we were parenting our little kids, right? As parents, we're the sage on the stage. Like that's it. You're looking at us for examples and things, you know, right and wrong versus right or wrong. And then you move to kind of like the mentor in the center, right? Where it's like you release a little bit of that control. And then when they get to be like that 18 to 25, 20, whatever it may be, like you move to becoming like the guide on the side. When I think guide means questions instead of advice. Yeah. Does that resonate or?
It totally resonates. I love your rhyming, the guide on the side. All those are catchy and really stick. The analogy or metaphor I use is that when they're young, you're like the mid-level manager with your very hands-on, you know, you're telling them what to do because they don't know. But that once they hit the teen years and beyond, you've been promoted to CEO. And now it's time to be a leader and to guide and to influence and to motivate and to teach instead of trying to control them.
I like that. I like that a lot. So what's number 2?
Yeah. Number 2 is that they end up feeling like you don't understand what's going on with them. Right. And so that happens because your conversation is focused on their behavior. So the grades plummeting, the smoking, the, you know, getting in with a bad group of friends, the can't get off video games or Instagram or TikTok, right? And so the conversation is about that. And what they're feeling in this conversation is that we don't understand what they're going through and what they're experiencing because, you know, we know from cognitive behavioral therapy that there is a thought and a feeling. That's what's going on inside of us that causes the behavior or the action that you see them doing. And so really the problem in this approach, in this kind of outdated rules, reward, punishment approach that we all grew up with, is that we miss the secret sauce of what's happening inside of them and really understanding that, and that's what's causing maybe the poor choices of not sleeping or not making healthy food choices, whatever the case may be, the circumstances. And so that is where I see the second reason that this approach doesn't work is our kids feel like, you know, I think like the common thing you probably remember hearing was like, you know, you don't understand, you don't get it. The phrases like that, that most of us hear quite frequently with our teenagers.
Yeah. Oh, and even probably sometimes like I hear that with 20-year-olds, right? They get into a certain situation and they're like, well, times are different now and you don't get it. But I think the point around is like people just don't have behaviors. They come from someplace, right?
Yeah.
The thoughts and the feelings all drive what we do in life. And getting people to realize, like, okay, if you can examine, just press pause in your life, whether it's you with your teens or with your adult kids or your spouse, and just say, okay, I'm having a thought and feeling in reaction to whatever they said or did. Is that the best thing for me to be doing right now? Like, or do I want to do something different? Mm-hmm. How do I want to approach it differently? Mm-hmm. And it becomes a skill to actually press the big old pause button to actually go through that.
Yeah. It's so important too, just to kind of slow ourselves down. It's hard to do when we're, worried or freaked out at what our teenagers doing, but it's so important to slow ourselves down.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So number 3. What's number 3?
Yeah. So the third thing is one, we've now shut the conversation down. They feel like we don't get them and understand what they're going through. And so when that happens, right, we actually don't stop the behavior or fix the behavior. And their argument ensues. They tend to dig their heels in. And so we then get more disappointed, more angry, more worried, more frustrated. And if you're like me, when that happens, the natural go-to response is to tighten the reins and to try to control them more. And, the bummer, but the reality is we don't really have control over them. Right? If they want to go smoke, we can't keep eyes on them 24/7 every day. They're going to do that. We can't actually make them study. We can't actually choose their friends for them. Right? And so I find that in step 3, what happens, or the third reason that it doesn't work, is either we tighten the reins even more, or we just get so exhausted from going round and round having the same conversation that we just give up.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember this happening with my son, right? He's a mini me. I could see him living his life and going through school, the same approach, like when memorizing things in school was the way we went. Like elementary school, you memorize a lot, 6th grade, and then 7th, 8th, you start to actually have to take what you memorized and process it and do things with it. And then in high school, even more, right? You got to actually go deeper. And both of us great memorizers. And I saw him going down that same path. So when he got to be freshman and sophomore year of high school, I started pushing exactly what you're talking about. The control started to get deeper and deeper because I wanted something different for him, but wasn't great at articulating that I wanted him to be different from me. But then it was somewhere along sophomore year, I realized if I keep pushing like this, right, instead of removing myself and allowing him to figure it out, this relationship is going to be different in 2 years when he graduates from high school and goes to college. I freed up the reins and he figured it out. I think that's what happens, right? Is that sometimes in parenting, when we push too hard, we push them away. But if we remove ourselves a little bit and just observe and maybe bumper them, they end up actually figuring it out for themselves because, that's part of the growth.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm so glad you shared that. I had a similar experience. I think what's so challenging about letting go of the reins is it's scary.
Yes.
Right? The uncertainty, the unknown of, releasing the control feels like, oh gosh, but then, then what might happen? And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But, what I know to be true is really the most direct path to calming those worries and fears is to open up the lines of communication and find out what's going on inside of them. And it's really that information is what is settling for us. We think it's going to be, God, just do the right thing, do what I'm telling you to do, and I'll feel so much better. But it really is not. It's our mind tricking us. And really the answer is, really getting them to open up and share what's going on inside of them. So you can, like we were talking about earlier, be more of a guide and a teacher and gently influencing.
Yeah. I think this is what comes to mind for me. It's when we try to exert more control to get a desired result from our kids or the people in our lives, we'll just say, is it's about making ourselves feel better, right? And taking care of what we need, as opposed to actually opening up the conversation to figure out this is happening. What do you need?
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about it, Jay, like we were never taught skills like that, in school or, at least I wasn't. And it is a big shift. But when you make that shift, it's really feels so good, and you end up just really enjoying your relationships more.
Yeah. I think what kicked it off for me with that 10th grade episode with my son is I went back to something he said to me when he was 5, right? I was reprimanding him for something, and he said, Daddy, when the volume in your voice goes up, the volume in my ears goes down. Right? Out of the mouth of babes. And I was like, that's what kicked in. Yeah, that's what kicked in.
Oh my gosh.
I'm thinking about like, oh, he's so right. Like if I keep pushing, he's going to not hear me even more and more and more.
Yeah. Oh gosh, you reminded me. I remember my daughter was like in her car seat in the back of, the car. We were driving somewhere, and all of a sudden she says, Mommy yelling, Daddy yelling, Julia yelling. And it was like, I was dead in our tracks, like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And right, it's just, that has always stuck with me. And I have to say, I really made an intentional effort to try not to yell after that, and really kind of check myself.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. What's on your journey? What's something you've recently learned about yourself?
Oh, I like that question. I think I've learned that I have this inner desire to always be growing and learning and just bringing meaning into my life. I think there were so many years I was a stay-at-home mom, and there were just so many years where my life was being a mom and supporting my kids and having a beautiful home with nutritious food and making sure everybody's where they need to be and all of that, I think I lost some of myself in the process. And so one thing I found to be true is, and actually thanks to a little nudge from my husband, when my youngest got his driver's license, as any of you know out there, once that happens, like they really spend a lot less time with you. When that happened, my husband was like, hey, Jeanine, what do you see yourself doing in the next chapter of your life? Because he knew I wasn't somebody who does well just sitting idly by without purpose or meaning. And, I remember thinking like, I don't know. Why are you asking me that? That was like a lot of pressure. But I ended up just kind of falling into coaching because I think, as I mentioned, my middle son was really struggling in high school. And my parenting strategies were not working. And so, when I finally came to a point where I thought I've got to go find new information and try different strategies. And so when I did that, and it just was so dramatically life-changing, I was kind of like, you know what? I think this is what I want to do for the next chapter, is help parents that are going through exactly what I went through and help, share these strategies with them. So hopefully their life can be a little easier and smoother than the high school years were for me in my parenting. And so that's when I went and got a life coach certification and started this business. But as I'm sure you know as well, Jay, there's really two paths on this business. One is being the coach, which we all love, and we love helping, right, our clients and serving them.
Yes,
and then the other is more the entrepreneur side. And for that, I think that is also like more recently where I've learned so much about myself that I can do hard things. And, it might be scary to get up and speak in front of 120 parents, but, I can be brave and I can be courageous and I can focus on serving them. And that's like what will motivate me to lean in and to do it and to show up and, really try to get into that energy of serving others, because I do really want to help other parents have an easier time of it.
Yeah.
That's kind of a long-winded answer to your question.
It's perfect.
I've never been asked that, so.
It's perfect. I love it, because a lot of empty nesters, like, their identity gets wrapped up in being Billy or Susie's mom or dad, right? And then the kids go off and they're stuck with this identity that doesn't fit, right? It's like an old pair of clothes, a pair of jeans that just doesn't fit right anymore. And you're not sure what to do about it. And that's the thing I hear the most, is that people feel like, I'm not sure what my passion or my purpose is now, that the kids are gone. I feel a little rudderless is what I hear from people. And so it's such a great example of, like, reminding people you are stronger and braver than you know. But, being strong and brave means you have to take a step. Right? And I'm a big believer in every step has purpose. So most people are like, well, I got to go from this to something completely different. No, figure out what fits best for you. Like that pair of jeans, just what fits best for you. So it was helpful to share that story, that hopefully somebody hears it and goes, oh no, here's what I can bring to the table now, that I'm not parenting 24/7 anymore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that. And I'm sure you coach people on this all the time. I mean, I know some of my clients who've been with me a little longer, and they're still with me now that their kids have launched. They have that same question, like, what now? What's meaningful to me now, and what purpose do I have now? And, I think, coming back to your values and, like, what makes you light up, and, what feels meaningful to you, and to kind of try to quiet your mind. I think I had to do this. Just the traditional job roles, right? And to kind of quiet my mind about, well, I don't want to do, all these traditional jobs that came to mind. And I couldn't go back to my career pre-kids. So then it was like, how do I connect with my values and what's meaningful to me, and to kind of pivot from there?
Yeah. Yeah. The values.
Going back. Like, do you bring people back to their values?
What's core to you, I think, is a big piece for people to kind of reconnect with. Sometimes people will say, oh, what did you used to love to do before you had kids? And lots of people had kids right out of college. They're like, well, I left college, got married, had kids. So there was no this time frame here. And so it's getting reconnected to the values of that. But also the other thing I find fascinating is, like, you learn a ton of skills as a parent. Those parents who are like super organizers, like they're the ones who organize everything, and other people are really good at, like, nutrition and lunches, and other people, like, as parents, we're not great at everything, right? As humans, we're not great at everything, but find the thing that you were really good at as a parent and figure out, is there a purpose there for you now? But I love that. But those things tie back to the values of what you believe in too. Yeah, that resonates so much. If you had, I don't know if you have one, but if you had to think about it, what's your empty nest life motto now that the kids are grown and flown?
Yeah. I don't have one. I've never thought about that. But I think in general, something that I try to remind myself of every day is to have fun, right? Like, why are we living this life if it's not to have fun? And to realize that for me, fun is connecting to, what's meaningful to me and purposeful to me. And just to kind of, I think the other thing I think about a lot is just trying to stay curious about life, curious about my clients, curious about my kids. I just find that really helps me stay connected to the ones that I love, and to my clients.
Yeah, I love that. We're not taught how to be curious. we're not taught how to communicate either, but we're not taught how to be curious. And I think those two things are so important to learn if you haven't done so. So I love that you brought that up, being curious. Yeah. Yeah. Jeanine, where can people find you online if they want to learn more about what you do?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Jay. You can go to my website, which is JanineMouchawar.com. All the links are there, or you can find me on Instagram at Jeanine.theparentingcoach. I'm also on Facebook. I have a Facebook group I love to do Facebook Lives in called, why am I forgetting the name for a minute? How to Not Lose Your Shit. I think it's something like that, because as parents, we do. But yeah, you can find me there. And I'm also on LinkedIn.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for being here, Jeanine.
Thank you for having me. I loved our conversation, and I love being connected with you, Jay.
Yeah, I love being connected to you, too. We'll see you around the internet, as they say.
Okay, sounds good. Take care.
All right.
Are you ready to start living and enjoying your empty nest years? If so, head over to jasonramsden.com and click Work With Me to get the conversation started. This Empty Nest Life is a production of Impact One Media, LLC, all rights reserved.